Good morning, everybody. Michelle is here. Michelle is here on January 31st, 2026 on a Saturday. And this is video 13. I'm going to churn them out. You know, these are extremely important topics. And so many people are just so scared and cowardly, in my opinion, because they'll ramble until the sun goes down and the sun goes back up and blah blah over politics. Okay, and being so concerned about these influencers that are on all these social media platforms, usually white males, and them rambling as if they're experts in every field under the sun. They're entertaining us. It's entertainment. Okay? It's entertainment, whereas you take it in and see if you can literally, figuratively, metaphorically dissect it and see if it's knowledgeable, worth being called knowledgeable. I remember when I was in elementary school. And when we were, I always had an issue with reading, because I just could not formulate things properly together. It was just, I can remember. And I do remember whereas one of the teachers suggested I go into a speech development class, and I think I needed permission from my mom. And remember, my mom, as I've said and shared, could barely read or write, and in most cases, she ignored a lot of correspondence that was sent to her, from me. So chances are a lot of that stuff was just ignored, and so the teacher had to go on. Couldn't be focusing just on me. There were other students that needed the teacher's attention, and those classes were crowded. I can remember being in elementary school, and those classes were crowded even then. But it was about this reading and comprehension that I got stumbled over that. I'm like, what do they mean by reading and comprehending? And, and in most cases, the teacher, I don't know. Again, a lot of our teachers, there were some great teachers out there. They did the best they could with what they had. I don't think there was a school board that was dictating them and telling them how to teach students. I don't know. I can't remember. But there were principals, vice principals, or whatever they were. And I thought the teachers did the best they could. I remember, a couple of teachers, they kept attempting to point out things to me. I remember one time I came in there in one class, and it was obvious that, that what the sweater I was wearing was dirty and it needed to be washed. So chances are there was a smell to that. I'm pretty sure it was, And I can remember one teacher, he came to me, as he was talking with the class, and he did one, it was obvious dirty. And I can remember, so he probably realized I was a visual. Sometimes teachers can pick up certain cues, and he was pointing this stain out to me. He was, messing around with my sweater, and I saw the dirt, and I'm thinking, oh boy. So I don't know if I stopped wearing that sweater, or I don't know what I did. But a lot of teachers, at least back then when I was in the elementary school system, I don't know what's going on now. I don't have any children. I have no clue. None. And thankfully. But that environment for the teachers, I can imagine it was extremely difficult. And let's be honest, some teachers couldn't tell one black student from the other. I remember being misnamed numerous times, you know. So there, so there was a lot of complexities there. So I can only imagine what it is now. I really can. So therefore, there was a lot of attempts is what I'm attempting to say. There was a lot of genuine attempts to teach us, even though again we were forced. They call it being bussed. I call it being forced to go across. Go across into another county or district or neighborhood, because they felt that the black neighborhood apparently wasn't up to par or something to that effect, which was a bunch of bullshit, and that was intentional. Let me not digress on that. So what I am attempting to do is help you along to reconstruct yourself, re-examine your life, dismiss the blame, dismiss the so-called traumas or abuse you may have suffered. See if you can dismiss that, because chances are your offender may be dead. So there's some safety there, right? Physical safety there, that particular person who caused this abuse and harm to you is not going to abuse you and harm you anymore, because they're dead. They're gone. So that gives you some breathing room to say, okay, because I told you in our neighborhood we had predators too. And usually were males, biological males. They were predators. But it was so weird though that for me, I was able to not, absorb that kind of behavior, even though it was towards me and towards others in the neighborhood. And what do I mean by that? I didn't allow that degeneracy and that predator-like behaviors and actions to necessarily affect me. I knew back then that I thought men were disgusting after a while. I mean, I really did. I thought they were just pure disgusting. And their behavior proved it, but I didn't allow so much of that that unwelcome, inappropriate attention towards me to affect me so much. It just made me more hyper. I had to, be very aware of my surroundings and And I told you there were certain men in the neighborhood that were protecting me, protecting the neighborhood. And one of them, I remember, like I said, I met him in McDonald's. I have videos on that. I met him when I used to work at a fast food restaurant as a 15-year-old. And then once I became 17, that's when he appeared, and he didn't. I wasn't necessarily afraid of him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given him my telephone number to the home, my parents' home. But he was a Vietnam vet. It was obvious that he had some issues, obviously. But he was very kind and gentle, and I think he was protecting me in the neighborhood. That's just an assumption. I have no idea, because he lived in the neighborhood, and he would always call the house, my parents' house, checking on me. And he did that even after I moved out. Kept calling. And my mom used to tell me, so-and-so called, Michelle, so-and-so called. I said, oh, God. I said, tell him to stop calling. I don't live here anymore. But he still kept doing it. And so chances are he's already passed away. So what I'm rambling about is, do yourself a favor and take away all of this being defensive about who you are, what you are, or why you are, or who you think you are. Okay? And see if you can re-examine certain portions of your life without ruminating about the abuse, without ruminating about the trauma. Can you do that? I think you can. No one has to know, however. I think if no one has to know that's what you're doing, you'll do it while no one's watching, So all I'm saying is, a lot of people are talking about these certain identities now. The transgender, the binary, the non-binary, the pansexuals, the homosexuals. The da 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 da. All of this is being discussed, and of course, our children are paying attention to this. Regardless of how you monitor your children, you can't get away from it. It's rumination over these sexualities and these identities. That's a rumination. And so a lot of people are, again, they're going to just be ruminating and spin themselves into a black hole, literally, figuratively, metaphorically, more so metaphorically, whereas all they're doing is ruminating, and eventually their brain cells are going to die because they're not using their thinking capabilities properly, and they're going to create a man-made, self-created dementia due to atrophy of their brain cells. They're not thinking about anything else except their transgenderism, their homosexualism, their identityism. They're not focusing on anything else in their life. And I told you, with me and with others, who I am intimate with is just a small portion of who I am. I'm more than who I'm sleeping with or who I desire intimacy from. I mean, gosh, you see how much time we're wasting? The same thing I said about when people are talking about their weight constantly, the size of their stomach, how much calories they need to take in every day and how much carbohydrates, it's just rumination. They get up talking about it. They go to bed talking about it. And the only reason why I am essentially talking about it on these devices is I'm assisting. I'm a helper. I know what it means to heal. It's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. And it creates permanent happiness and joy. It really does. And so you don't have to get on these social media platforms, which is extremely dangerous. I've said that. When you're deconstructing and re-examining your life, you need to be really cautious and set up parameters on your computer where it signs off after a certain amount of time, so it'll snap you out of it, so that you don't be sitting there all day long, whether you're playing video games or having meetings or whatever the case may be. Constantly talking about that one subject, my sexuality and who I'm sleeping with and who I identify as. I can help. I know I can, but everybody else is attempting to help too. So you have to, and a lot of people need to recognize you have free will to do whatever the hell you want. Don't let anybody speak these illusionary factors to you. You have free will, but you have to protect that. Again, when it comes to a biological woman, there's more than just glam or no glam. A lot of biological women are just performing, and they're admitting that when they go to work, they have to perform, because we all have to provide for ourselves. So they go there, perform, pretend that they want to be there. They know they need to be there because they got to pay their bills. So yes, there's a lot of performing with all of us. I did that in my former job, as well as a law enforcement first responder. I had to pretend, not with the citizens per se, but pretend with the management, the dictatorship management. I can guarantee you all of us are working on the dictators in some form or fashion, whether it's our homeowners association, whether it's our leaders in the community, whether in most definitely in our employment, where the so-called leadership or management believes that you are subservient and you're supposed to subjugate yourself, and then they kind of dangle your paycheck metaphor over your head, and threatening if you don't make a certain amount of phone calls a day, threatening, and that's dictatorship, and it's a toxic work environment. I know our current administration, I can guarantee if a lot of those so-called administrative staff could say anything, they would say that yes, they're in a deep toxic environment where it's life-threatening to them, but they need the income. They're dependent. A lot of people got themselves dependent. Just like on the social media platform, they had this glitch. Whereas, followers disappear, likes disappear, views disappear, whatever. And some people were basing their livelihood on that. And these social media platforms ought to be just, considered like a part-time. And a lot of people had quit their jobs and this and that and the other, and focusing on just the social media platform. That's very, very, very risky. But you do have free will. Do as you choose, but make sure you don't become dependent. Are you saving any of that money that you claim you're making every month? What are you doing with that money? So there are things to consider. So I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to just upload these videos and see what happens. I mean, I know they get viewed, but then I want to know what's the effects of it. Whether people will start speaking honestly about what's really going on and recognize that there are consequences to our behaviors and actions that may not be crystal clear right now. We are on like I said, that metaphor with the conveyor belt. We're churning out half-baked goods. Half-baked goods. Okay? And these goods deserve universal love. Deserve to be considered as human beings, which they are. But at the same time, there has to be a pause and actually a stop to this constant conveyor belt, and ask yourself, okay, what is the purpose of all of this that is happening? Why is politicians promoting increasing in birth rates? And why are they lying to us about the fact that there are certain communities that are declining in population? No, they have just relocated, because those places where they are abandoning, where they are leaving, the exodus, I talked about that, are not serving them. It's a neglected communities, villages. Okay, and the weather the weather is the main factor as to why people are moving around, leaving certain towns. They don't feel safe. Some of them know, okay, that mountain is coming down, or a mudslide is eventually going to happen. Some people know an earthquake is going to happen. Tornadoes, okay, we're cutting down trees that are supposed to protect us from these storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. We're cutting, we're I don't know what we're doing with the mountains, but the mountains are disappearing, and they're supposed to be there to protect. That's why the pyramid was built as protection. That is what mountains do as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop right now. And I'm going to go ahead and send peace and love all over the stars and moon and mountains. This is about restoring universal love, because we're all inclusive, but we have to monitor our behaviors and actions and ask the critical questions as to what is really going on. And no one has to know.